The National Prosecuting Authority's investigating Directorate is edging closer to becoming a permanent entity. That's after Cabinet approved a bill to that effect. Last year, President Cyril Ramaphosa announced plans to make the Directorate a permanent body with the hopes that it will strengthen the NPA's investigative powers, especially in light of the fight against corruption and revelations from the state capture inquiry process. Let's talk more about this, the bill at least, with Executive Director at Corruption Watch Karam Singh. Karam, a very good evening to you. Grateful for your time. So is this really the second coming of the Scorpions, as some have dubbed it?
Yes, it looks like it's something similar to what we saw previously with the Scorpions. I mean, I think what's critical to note is that the Scorpions model was based on this notion of prosecution-led investigations, so that, you know, if you had a target of an investigation for a corruption matter, that the prosecutors would be involved in those investigations from an early stage, so that by the time the matters were ready for prosecution, ready for court, that all the T's were crossed and the I's dotted. So this was challenged in terms of separation of powers, and there was the Kempepe Commission that said that this is a legitimate approach. It's best practice internationally. So on the one hand, it is a positive development. On the other hand, it does raise some concerns about, what is the approach from this administration broadly to reforming the institutional architecture in the fight against corruption, because there are other initiatives that are ongoing which haven't been completed. So the timing of this, although it was announced some time ago, seems like it might be premature in some ways.
Which are the areas do you think need perhaps to be clarified most urgently, and how do we avoid perhaps doubling up on structures that end up doing the same work?
You know, we have something called the National Anti-Corruption Strategy, which was approved by Cabinet a couple of years ago. And with the National Anti-Corruption Strategy came the establishment of the National Advisory Council Against Corruption, which is largely made up of members of civil society. They've got various work streams that they're looking at, issues around procurement reform, around enhancing whistleblower protection. And one of the key work streams that they're talking about is the issue of around the institutional architecture in the fight against corruption. Viewers will recall that we had the Glenister case, that South Africa is a signatory to the UN Convention Against Corruption. And what's envisioned in terms of both the Glenister judgment and the UNCAC is that South Africa would establish an independent anti-corruption agency, a dedicated agency with independence, that's well-resourced, that's got specialized skills, that would be a one-stop shop in the fight against corruption. This is international best practice, and it's not clear that the ID would really pass the muster in terms of being this independent anti-corruption agency. So while it's positive that the NPA is capacitated in its fight against corruption, it still would appear that the ID would fall short of what would ultimately be the first prize or the best prize, which is an all-inclusive anti-corruption agency, possibly built around the capacity of existing agencies like the Special Investigating Unit.
So when Herman Cronje resigned as head of the ID in the last, year or so, one of the issues that were in the media was that she left because ultimately so much had been put on the ID as far as what it needed to achieve, but there weren't the basics to get it done. So not enough staff, not enough experience, not enough expertise. So should it become a permanent structure, which it now appears it's going to be, how should it be resourced to make sure that it exists by more than just name, basically?
Well, I mean, absolutely, the resourcing, must be commensurate with the structure. So if the ID, for instance, is talking about, employing some of our top forensic investigators, our top data analytic, forensic people, cyber analytic, these are specialized skills, which would require an appropriate budget. So I think you're right. One of the frustrations that Advocate Cronje had was that, a lot of these basics weren't in place. It was difficult to employ people. There was a lot of red tape. So, presumably with the legislation going through, there would then be, the appropriate regulations to either bring staff in from other agencies or bring staff in from inception. But obviously, an entity like this won't work if it's not effectively resourced, if there's not the necessary specialized skill to do the type of complex investigations that would be required.
And on the issue of complex investigative work and the skill that's needed, it speaks to, does it not, to some degree, to the lack of convictions or the lack of progress altogether in some of the major cases of the last decade or so. When you look at what's supposed to be incoming or in the in-tray from the Zondo Commission of Inquiry, we've barely scratched the surface. And even when the New Lane case went to court, that basically crumbled.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely concerning. We've passed the 1-year anniversary of Judge Zondo's submission of his report. What we expected to see following the Zondo Commission was a whole range of different initiatives, consequence management in terms of debarment, companies implicated, recovery of stolen assets, and critically prosecutions. The NPA brought a number of cases before the court. The first case, as you mentioned, the New Lane case, was dismissed at an early stage, and now we're waiting to see progress on these other cases. But as we stand today, 1 year down from the conclusion of the Zondo Commission, we haven't seen a single prosecution for state capture, and we have significant evidence, adverse findings against individuals. Obviously, those findings were a Commission of Inquiry findings and not criminal court findings beyond a reasonable doubt. But, we really need to see successful prosecutions now if we're going to, say that all the time and investment that went into the Zondo Commission was worth it. Without that kind of accountability, much of what's happened in the name of the Zondo Commission will be seen as hollow.
Right. And whenever we speak, of course, about South Africa's fight against corruption, the establishment, or the strengthening of agencies set up to achieve that goal, there's always the question of their insulation from political drama, political influence. I mean, the Scorpions themselves, we know, in their demise, central to that were issues around the politics of the country at the time. So how do we do that with the ID? And back to what you were saying about the creation perhaps of a sort of one-stop shop agency to deal with corruption. Is it better when there are multiple entities as far as protecting them perhaps from influence from whoever's in charge at the time?
This has kind of become a bit of a perennial debate now in terms of, do we fear the creation of a single entity that could possibly be captured, or are we happy with a multi-agency approach? The challenge with a multi-agency approach is the handoffs that happen within the system, with one agency investigating, another agency recovering money, another agency doing prosecutions. And a lot of times that's where the matters fall down, and where, we don't see successful investigations driven through to prosecutions. I think we need to avoid a kind of defeatism when it comes to thinking about building resilient institutions. You don't do it overnight. It takes time to build the democracy, and we need to double down on the fact that we need to have strong, resilient, capacitated, but critically independent institutions that can't be easily captured or easily tampered with. One of the ways that you assure that independence is ensuring that there are special rules and requirements around appointments, so that the best people get appointed into the leadership positions, and that it's not easy to dismiss or fire people the way we saw, former President Thabo Mbeki tamper with the tenure of then National Director Vusi Pikoli. So we need those special guarantees around the security of tenure. These things take time. We saw that the Scorpions were very easily brought down by resolutions at the ANC party conference in 2008. So, when it comes to designing new institutions, we need to try to avoid these mistakes and do everything we can to insulate them from political interference.
Karam Singh, Executive Director at Corruption Watch. Good to speak to you as always. Thank you.